Thanks for joining us in the Florida Today newsroom. I'm Matt Reed, and today we question your Congressman, Representative Bill Posey, who just attended a scientific briefing on a major issue facing Brevard, the pollution crisis and sought-after cleanup of the Indian River Lagoon. We wanted to know, what can or will the Republican from Rockledge do to help? Also in the news, Posey's recent vote against a budget compromise in Washington. And I wanted to know how Posey explains his vote last fall to defund Obamacare in exchange for passing a budget resolution. That move precipitated a government shutdown that affected Brevard's space workforce. Take a look. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us in the studio. You just attended a briefing at Florida Institute of Technology about the Indian River Lagoon, the problems that it faces, maybe some solutions. What were your takeaways from that?
The takeaways were, number one, it's the greatest focus of attention on the problems of the lagoon I've seen in my lifetime. A lot of us have seen a deterioration in the quality of the lagoon over the years. I mean, we talk about when I was a young boy, we fished there. I remember places where we could see the fish in the water and we could tell what kind they were.
Is that right?
We could distinguish a trout from a catfish from a blowfish or all. I mean, the water was that clear, you know. Most sandy bottom. You don't see that now. I mean, it's changed. It didn't happen overnight. It was a metamorphosis. And from time to time, one group would get alarmed or another group would get alarmed and another. But now I think there's probably not a person that is aware of the deterioration of the water quality in the Indian River Lagoon that is not concerned about it. And that's first. And it was good to see so many groups coming together, kind of coalescing, saying, look, we want to be part of the solution. Don't think we really need anybody to identify a problem.
Right.
We just need some solutions. And there will obviously be a lot of different solutions suggested. There have already been many suggested.
Lawn fertilizer, septic tanks.
Yeah, cut through another
muck, all kinds of
inlet.
things.
I mean, you name it, you know. And it will need to be a holistic approach. I mean, there's not going to be, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to have a clean lagoon.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's going to...
And it may take a while.
Exactly. It won't happen overnight. Probably going to be real expensive. And it's going to have to be a holistic approach. You have to kind of stop this runoff. You kind of have to stop this runoff, this kind of pollution. I mean, it's dirty because of what goes into it. And you're only going to clean it up if you stop putting bad stuff in it and then start trying to purify what's there.
Well, one of the things that you hear when it comes to big, complicated environmental issues like this is the science there. Yeah. Especially from a policymaker's point of view. You're always wanting some confidence that any solution you try to help or push is going to make a difference and has a scientific basis for it. What is your impression in this case? I mean, it was at the Florida Institute of Technology, but I don't know. I mean,
well, I mean, I don't think anybody needs scientific evidence that we've got a problem with the water quality in the lagoon. The scientific focus is going to have to be on the best, most efficient, and most accountable solutions, the best bang for the buck.
Well, how does a congressman get involved? I mean, do you see a role for yourself or even for the federal government in helping with some of the solutions?
Well, I think everybody who's a citizen in my district, which is Brevard, Indian River, and part of Orange County, has some responsibility for it. Everybody, bar none. St. John's Water Management District has a website, and it tells how every homeowner can help be part of the solution.
Sure. So
if I wasn't in Congress, this needs to be something that I should be willing to do my part in to take care of.
Right.
You know, being in Congress does allow you the bully pulpit, so to speak, or the ability to focus attention on issues, to bring people together, which we've tried to do on a sundry of issues. We've got advisory committees from, you know, every discipline you can imagine, multiple professions, disciplines, and this is now in the mix, and so we'll be able to help focus attention. I have been a support of the National Estuaries funding. I guess 2010 is when it came. They had it in place, and then it was gone for a while. And anyway, I guess 2010, when it was a partisan vote, I think I was one of the 30-some that supported it. You know, when they managed to make it partisan, how you can do that kind of stuff. But they did, the two sides fighting over it. And there are money for estuaries, and I think I was under the impression, my staff had briefed me and said we were getting $600,000 to $800,000 a year for our lagoon. And I talked to Troy today, and he said actually we get about 500. He said we're eligible for $1 million. You know, we're working on that. There's some other ideas Stuart Burns, my chief of staff, has that might encourage a wiser investment of some more of that resource money to help us out. But again, that's not, you know, the easy fix. And you know, the least sum I've heard mentioned, and you've heard them mention, and I've heard them mention, and the most conservative cost I've heard for cleaning up this lagoon, if you're going to do any serious demucking, was $100 million.
$100 million?
Yeah, that's the lowest I've heard. And like I said, it won't happen tomorrow. But you know, we know where the muck is. We know how much damage it's doing. I mean, they've trended for a long period of time the growth of the seagrass and the deterioration of the seagrass by, you know, 1,000-acre increments. And so it's a lot of indicators pointing to where the first remedy is going to be. But like an MPO works in a county, right. I think we kind of need a vehicle to organize and vet all the proposed solutions. And so there should be pretty much, at the end of the day, if it's science-based, universal agreement on what's the wisest expenditure, you know, and the wisest method to do the cleanup.
So it could be the St. Johns River Water Management District or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. They've, like I said, they've been very proactive in it. There's a lot of organizations that have. So.
Let's talk about the budget a little bit. We just had I guess that was the first budget agreement in a long, long time. First time Democrats in the Senate actually responded and came up with one. Not the prettiest thing in the world, and you voted, I believe, against it. Why don't you break it down for us a little bit?
Well, it really was ugly. Nobody liked it. Even the people that voted for it didn't like it. And, you know, I have fought since I got there to have a 72-hour rule. You know, I never much appreciated Pelosi's statement, we have to pass it so you can find out what's in it. And I pushed from my side and on my party that we need to have a 72-hour rule in Congress that give us a chance to read legislation before you ask us to vote on it. And I'll tell you right now, if you don't give me a chance to read it, I'm going to vote no. Well, they called it a 3-day rule, so technically, I guess 48 hours and 1 minute, they can call it 3 days.
Okay.
But they didn't get there. This was 46 hours by the time they brought this thing to the floor. So number one, as a matter of principle, you have put in front of me with 46 hours to read, with all my committee assignments and everything else I have to do, a 1,158-page bill. Now, I did have a chance to read half of it, and I learned to start at the middle.
And you got a smart staff, right? I mean, they can...
Yeah, but, you know, it's not fair to them. You know, it's not, they're not voting on it, I'm voting on it. So, you know, you get this heavy stuff, I want to read it myself. And I thought about it. I thought, okay, we're going to section this thing up. You take this, you know, then we got to get back together. No, I can't say I didn't have time to read it unless I try. You know, so, and again, I learned, Matt, not to start reading at page 1. You know, because the first half of the bill is, you know, just start in the middle and you start getting the juicy stuff, and hopefully I'll get to the end of it, and then I'll go back and start at the end, the least important stuff.
And you're looking for the things that you've been working on, right? I mean,
things that you know about.
Okay.
Number 2, it didn't cut spending substantially at all. I mean, there was no significant spending cuts. They cut military, but they did not touch 80 entitlement programs, untouched. So welfare was fine, military, the guys that are actually working, putting their lives on the line, we'll cut them. But we're not going to touch welfare spending. That's number 2. Number 3, I didn't like a lot of the State Department stuff. We have laws against dealing with terrorist countries. but there's a paragraph that says, but the president can waive it. What? You shouldn't have a paragraph. He can't waive that. Well, how else do you think he sent our fighter jets to Egypt?
Why is that? Oh, because the sale and the revenue from the fighter jets is part of the budget? I mean, I don't understand why that would be in a budget.
No, it just gives him the latitude. You know, it just gives him the latitude to do that with State Department money. I mean, who do you know that would have said, hey, we need to spend $340 million to bail out Detroit as a reward for their bad fiscal management with your kids and your grandkids' tax money, because we don't have the money to pay it. We had to borrow money to bail them out. So, you know, those are the reasons. Now, in fairness to the people who voted for it, there were a couple good points to it. And you know, number one, having an agreement, they say now with the omnibus, now we'll go back to regular order, which is we'll pass a budget and we'll pass 12 separate appropriations bill, and we'll fund government the way it was designed to be funded, and the way it historically did work before
hasn't happened
5 years ago. Yeah.
Has it happened while you've been in Congress?
No.
Okay.
The Senate never did a budget since I've been in Congress till this year.
Okay.
Till this year. The House had done them, but the last 2 years.
So you don't have any reason to have faith in regular order because you haven't seen it yet.
You've got that right.
Okay.
Now we've regular ordered some stuff, and they say, oh, you can't regular order. We even regular ordered the budget. We like the last time we did the budget, and my hat's off to Speaker Boehner for doing this. You know, a lot of Republicans, oh, what are you doing? Oh, what? I said, no, that's the way the process is supposed to work. There were 450 amendments filed, most of them Democratic amendments, and
apparently like 40 of them from Alan Grayson.
Yeah. And we heard every one of them.
Okay.
And you know, everybody thought, oh, somebody will move the previous question about halfway through that. They'll never sit around and do that. Well, we met the first night. We met Monday night till midnight. Started at 8 o'clock Tuesday, went to 1 o'clock. Started at 8 a.m. Wednesday, went to 2 o'clock. Thursday, went to 3 o'clock. I missed an hour somewhere because Friday, the final day, we actually got out 5 a.m. Saturday morning when we heard the last amendment.
Was this part of the 3-day waiting period? Or
Or
you had to wait. The amendments were part of what you waited 3 days on to find out what the amendment said.
The way that should work, the way it works in the legislature, is after you go through the amendment process, then you have a 72-hour cooling period where if you change one word in it, the clock starts ticking again to stop people from doing the last-minute secret amendments. But you should have an open process that you don't need 3 days to debate your amendment, you know, to a budget. And so we had the 450 amendments or more, and we went through and heard every single one of them, and some of them were adopted, you know. And the only thing was, excuse me, is that if you wanted to take money out of some category, or if you wanted to have a new spending category, you had to show where you were going to get it from, which is new up there, a new paradigm, and that's why most of the amendments didn't go through. I mean, you couldn't just say, oh, I want to take 10 pounds of pork home and make bacon out of it to make people vote for me. And, okay, well, where do you plan to get that from? Questions that had typically hadn't been asked in the past, you know, and then you'd have the people who you're taking it from, like me and the other people, say, no, that's not going to happen. Next amendment. But we did go through that's what you call regular order. You know, everybody's amendments were heard. The first 2 years I was there under Pelosi, I was never allowed to file a single amendment. I mean, that was my stock and trade in the State House. You know, it's much easier than passing a standalone bill. Just wait till it comes along with the same subject matter, you know.
Especially if you're in the minority. It's one of the few things you can do.
And never allowed to file a single amendment. And now, you know, we've got some of our best stuff passed, you know. I mean, it's just what you need to do, even if you're in the majority. It's so much more efficient. And it's not that you hide anything. You know, it's still just as transparent, but just don't get in line behind 4,000 other people to get your idea to the floor.
Let's talk a little bit about, go back a little bit further. that vote that got to the point where the government shut down and everything. No surprise to anybody, you had voted consistently against anything to do with Obamacare, including repealing it, defunding it, and all that stuff. We get to the point where now it's connected to spending bill to keep things going, and you voted, what was it? You voted for initially to defund it, but then it, I think, what was it? It changed to simply to put off the individual mandate and that kind of thing. I think we criticized you over that because it seemed to us like there was this risk of a shutdown, and with so many space assets and this county kind of hurting still, it was too big of a risk. But I wanted to give you a chance to explain kind of what was your outlook on this and why did you vote the way that you did?
Well, first of all, and the first issue was about defunding Obamacare. Mm-hmm. That didn't work. The next issue was to delay the individual mandate. And I mean, you thought we were trying to assassinate the Pope. I mean, with the outrage over, the whole thing. And as it comes out, the president delayed the individual mandate, and he didn't even have the authority to do it. And then finally it boiled down to, look, at least the president and Congress should be subject to it with no subsidies. And they said no. And so people said, well, you shut down the government over those silly little things. And I loved on Angry Woman's show, Rachel Maddow. She had a chart on her show. And it says, here's what the Republicans asked for. And it listed about 20 things. And it said, here's what they got, a big zero. And, the Republicans were always pictured and framed, even by you guys, as the party unwilling to compromise. If there was a compromise, we would have got something. We got nothing. There were surveys that were taken that said, hey, if there's a shutdown, the Republicans will get blamed for it. They wanted to shut the doggone thing down, so the Republicans get blamed for it because the public opinion polls showed that we would lose popularity. And they would have shut the government down. If it hadn't been that, it would be something else.
Well, I think in this case, you're right. It was the Democrats who were not going to budge on repealing Obamacare.
Anything.
But that's why it seemed like this is going to be a train wreck. This is going to be a situation. Well, there are other things that are called a train wreck too, but I mean, in this case, we thought this isn't going to work, and we have so much riding on this.
How long do you deal with the terrorist?
Are you calling me a terrorist?
No.
Okay.
I'm saying, how would you deal with the terrorist? I mean, somebody comes, a bully. Do you like dealing with bullies? Give me your lunch money. I mean, that's the way they did it. So they said it's our way or the highway, or we're going to have a shutdown, and you're going to get blamed for it and get voted out of office. And you know what? I don't fear that. I don't fear getting voted out of office for doing what I think is important and doing what I think is right. And a lot of my colleagues felt the same way. But again, back to the Maddow chart. What we asked for, we gave them plenty of opportunity to have an honorable way out, and we could have a compromise ground. And they basically agreed to zero. Zero, Matt. Unwilling to budge one single iota.
True. It sounds to me like they were ready for a clash. Because
they wanted a shutdown.
Well, talk a little bit about some of these outside groups I heard so much about. You've got Heritage Action, you've got Freedom Works, you have these groups, Ted Cruz, all these people that seem to be getting a lot of attention going into this. They seem to be anticipating that if that there was a chance this could lead to a shutdown. What kind of influence do they have in the House and on members like you?
On me, absolutely zero, not a zilch. For many, many years, I looked to the Heritage Foundation as maybe my most trusted source of philosophical think tank data. A year or so ago, they formed Heritage Action.
A political arm.
Yes. And they're nothing to me now more than political operatives. They're out there to raise money. They're out there to say that any Republican who uses common sense and judgment and in any way works for the other side needs to be trumped out of office. You had an article in the paper yesterday that talked about me being the third highest graded member of the delegation for reaching across the aisle, getting co-sponsorships of legislation. And I may be one of the worst ranked Republicans on the Heritage grading list. Yeah. No argument that I have one of the most conservative voting records up there. Freedom Works gave me 100. But Freedom Works is not yet a political operative, and I'm afraid Heritage has turned into that, and it's like losing a relative. It bothers me, but do they try and strong-arm members of Congress, threatening to give them bad grades? Sure they do. And
well, is it more than the grades? I mean, do they get involved with donors? Do they throw up barriers to
I don't know what else they do. I mean, I really don't know. Obviously, they have a really good base, which keeps them operating, and I don't know how many resources they direct one way or another, but they're no longer what I thought, the standalone, independent, respect me for being a think tank.
Okay.
Now they're trying to force feed opinion and into the stereotype that they envision as being important to save this country, and I don't apparently fit into that mold.
Well, what are some of the things that you're working on for Brevard County? Do you have local bills, any kind of issues that you're trying to troubleshoot for people here? What's on the Bill Posey agenda for the next few months?
Well, for the next few months, this is still organizational times, in Congress. I mean, we'll be having, when we go back next weekend, we'll be immersed. We'll go to some place that has a pretty name, and it'll be like a pretty resort, and we'll be sequestered for 72 hours, I mean, I don't even know why I got to leave town. You just look on the inside of a conference room for 72 hours, trying to develop policy initiatives and, see where you're going to go as a group forward. And the following week, the Democrats will be doing the same thing. But that's
space issues in play.
Yeah, and we pretty much came out pretty good in the space issues with the omnibus, and did a little bit better actually than we expected. But there's such, again, Washington dysfunction. A lack of clear mission at NASA for how to spend the money we have appropriated. What's the best bang for the buck? There's a lot of different opinions up there, and the committee has tried to focus on those. And traditionally it's been a very bipartisan committee. It's but for a couple of reasons that I think I understand, there's been a couple issues where partisanship has poked up its head where it shouldn't, and it's kind of held us back a little bit. But.
You had introduced a bill or some kind of legislation trying to give NASA a long-term budget, give the director, the administrator some job security, or at least a long-term window to try to get things done. Where does that stand?
Yeah, and the background on that, Matt, over the last 2 decades, we've had over 24, we call them missions to nowhere. The most expensive of which was, I guess, the $9 billion Constellation mission.
Sure.
And then a new president gets elected, and that's not a mission anymore. And Congress has canceled missions before, so every 2 years you have a chance on getting, a new Congress. Every 4 years a new president, and they all have different goals, and there's no continuity. There's no long-term, really concrete long-term vision or focus on how to spend money or resources. Remember when, well, you wouldn't remember, but you read about it when President Kennedy made his famous speech,
Sure.
And we're going to put a man on the moon within the next day. And man, this country was unified, the Congress was unified, in reaching that goal. We were all in line, and now it's all over the place. Some people want to go this direction, some people want to go this direction, some want to go to the moon, some don't want to go to the moon, some don't want to go anywhere. Some want to bury their head in the sand. Some people realize the importance of space for national defense, national security, some don't. So to stop having more missions to nowhere and more wasted billions upon billions of dollars we thought, let's have a NASA administrator and basically appointed by eminent scientists, not congressmen, for a term of 10 years. It could be rescinded, but to have some continuity there, so that every president that comes in won't name a new NASA administrator, tell them to go a different direction than one did last year or 2 years before that, and continue to put our space program in a tailspin. So that would allow them to have a 10-year plan of goals and a way of reaching that from a spending perspective. That would just make a whole lot of sense. I mean, no business, well, not very many businesses, at least they shouldn't be managed on a crisis du jour basis. And that's kind of what NASA ends up being right now. And we have some bright people there, a great history, an incredible amount of technical expertise and knowledge, but they're just not kind of funneled all together, and they're not in sync with Congress, and Congress is not in sync with itself. And so this is an attempt, and it wasn't my bright idea, quite frankly. I would love to take credit for that because it was a really good idea, I think, but it was Congressman Culbertson from Texas, and he ran it by me, and I just think, you know, now, could I find some problems with it? Yeah, I can. But I find more problems with remaining in the dysfunctional trajectory that we're in now.
Right.
So.
Well, it's certainly wasteful, and we can certainly do better. Bill Posey, thank you so much for joining us today in the studio.
Thanks.
Interesting comments from Congressman Posey. That's our program. Remember, you can share clips of this program with friends. Look for us under the video tab at floridatoday.com. I'm Matt Reed. We'll see you next Wednesday on WEFS and floridatoday.com.